Cordially welcome you all to this session on Framework for Educators of 21st Century at Tech Bharat 2021. Tech Bharat is an initiative of Laghu Udyog Bharati Karnataka and IMS Foundation and is envisioned as a platform to guide, mentor and empower startups and SMEs. A heartfelt thanks to Government of India and Government of Karnataka for their support and encouragement. The traditional education system, with its roots in the industrial era, is tailored to enabling students to acquire a standard set of tools and knowledge to solve repeated problems that were relatively static and required a low degree of creativity and thinking. However, opportunities for youth in the new age economy are dynamic and require the creativity of thinking well beyond what was required in the industrial age. Educators play an important role as mentors in a context where knowledge is freely available and students are pursuing a much wider set of skills. In this context, how should the role of an educator evolve? How do they make the transition from being a tutor to a facilitator? What are the characteristics of an educator of 21st century? To discuss these and more, we have eminent panelists with us today. Firstly, I would like to welcome Mr. Syed Sultan Ahmed, founder and chief learner at Elexcel Ideas, an organization that enables learning for life by creating experiences through its research, events, films, and publications for students, parents, and educators. He's a first-generation social entrepreneur and winner of 6 President of India's National Film Awards, and has been transforming education through his brands. School Cinema, which makes meaningful films, Crayon, which conceptualizes and organizes large impact events, Mentor, which creates platform for sharing education ideas, and IKFF, which is the world's largest children film festival. He would be moderating the session as well. A heartfelt thanks to you, Mr. Sultan, for accepting our invitation, and we cordially welcome you. I take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Jaisimha Kashyap, founder Insight. Mr. Jaisimha has a rich experience of over 25 years in conducting experiential and life-improving workshops to participants from different walks of life, corporates, colleges, schools, and many more. He specializes in an area that dwells on managing one's mind and attitude, a key attribute to an individual's success. He has delivered more than 8,600 presentations, workshops, seminars, and motivational talks all over the country. We are excited to have you here, Mr. Jaisimha, and welcome. I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome Ms. Pratima Jagdish, founder, Crescers Academy. She's a corporate leader and HR evangelist turned academic entrepreneur. She's a professional and mindfulness coach and a certified NLP master coach. She was recognized among the 100 most influential HR professionals in Asia. She loves training so much that today it stands as her purpose. Crescers was her brainchild and was conceptualized with a mission to build an emotionally intelligent generation through the Life Skills program. We thank you for accepting our invitation and welcome you, ma'am. I'd also like to welcome Mr. Ninad, founder at Utter.in. Utter is a team of spirited individuals working towards striking the perfect balance between technology, learning, and change. Their aim is to make quality learning accessible and affordable to people from all walks of life. Utter gives learners access to a fun learning environment that aims at building confidence and giving people the opportunity not only grow in their careers, but their personal lives as well. We are excited to have you here, Mr. Nilan, and look forward for your interactions. I now request Mr. Sultan to take over the session and moderate it. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Vishnu. It's such a pleasure to be here addressing people from various walks of life at Tech Bharat. First of all, let me acknowledge and congratulate the entire team behind and all the organizers for putting this wonderful event together, because it's forums like these and conversations like these that bring about change. We are part of a democracy, and conversations are the first building block to a democracy. And any change happens when you start thinking and talking about it. Thank you for lining up such amazing people. It's an honor and a privilege to share the dais with Mr. Jaisimha, who's been around, such an experienced educator. And what's amazing about him is that he's so innovative as well. Dr. Pratima, coming from a corporate background and dedicating her life towards the improvement of education, especially in the space of life skills, is absolutely commendable. And Ninad is a hardcore educator who's almost lived his entire professional career in the space of education, both school and higher education, and now turned entrepreneur and runs a fantastic organization which is solving one very key problem. We will go to our panelists in a bit. To begin with, I'm going to share a few thoughts and my insights and my experiences about this topic. When we talk about framework for educators, and educator is absolutely the core piece when it comes to education, because whenever we talk about any system, any institution, the educator, the teacher, the lecturer, the professor, they are the ones who are key to delivering the quality of education that we always keep talking about. The biggest onus on ensuring that children grow up to be fine human beings revolves around the educator. And that's a very well acknowledged piece, and all of us understand that and relate to that. One of the biggest challenges that has happened for us is not something because of COVID. And this challenge has been brewing in the world all around us for almost 15, 20 years. And that challenge is change. Change has been happening, and it has been transforming a lot of our spaces around. But somewhere education seems to have, still kept itself very traditional, very, deep in its roots. And the amount of change that has happened in education has not been as much as is seen in the other sectors. Let me start off with an example of another sector and talk about what transformation does, and then jump into today's topic about how do you build a framework for educators for the 21st century. When I was a little kid, I remember having distinct memories of going to a bank and carrying a check with me and, giving that check at the counter and picking up a big metal token and sitting there and waiting for those numbers to flash. And, sometimes I wonder it was our money. And I was trying to take that money from myself or the family, and I had to wait in line. And the bank decided when the bank opened, when the bank closed. The bank decided, when they would give the money, because in the afternoons there was no cash counter. So we had to go with that. Now, then there was a generational shift, and there was the introduction of the ATM. Now I could go anywhere in any nook and corner of the city or the country and, draw my money. And from an ATM, we moved to an era, what I call the Paytm era, or the mobile banking era. Now, I don't even need to step out of my house. With an amazing initiative of the UPI from the government of India, we're probably one of the world's most advanced, financial management institutions that we have with the UPI. And that allowed everyone from a Google Pay to an Amazon to, everybody to allow me access to my banking. Now, that is generations of change. But when you look at schools, what we've tried to do is we've retained that old structure, which is a building with classrooms and people. And we've tried to make some incremental changes in the manner in which we are teaching. So what we've traditionally, if I have to compare it with the banking, is we've just made a more sophisticated bank, or we're trying to make it more computerized, or bringing in a little more interaction inside. But we've not transformed education. So what I see happening over the next 5 or 10 years is should be a transformation, because we don't have a choice, because the world is demanding. And one of those fast forwarding, incidents, or probably a life-changing, occasion in our life has been the COVID, and it has forced all of us to adapt. We are now doing this webinar. We're doing this conference online, and all of us are absolutely comfortable. And Mr. Jayasima, coming from, probably my father's generation, is so comfortable, and he's going to be a part of this. And we've all been forced to do it. So keeping this entire background in mind, I'm going to list out 5 areas, 5 points, which I think educators need to be focusing on if they have to equip children to live a good life. I just want to give you an analogy. My company's name is LXL Ideas, and it literally translates into learning the X factor of life. Because in schools and colleges, we learn a lot about math and science, but we learn very little about our own selves. We learn very little about living a better life. We learn mathematics, but very little about finance management. We learn English and other languages, but very little about communication. We learn civics, but most of our educated youth don't go out and vote. And every single election is proof to that. And I think that's what needs to change. Can we make education more relevant to life? And in that context, one of the first things that we need to do is our educators need to learn visual storytelling. The world is absolutely visual today. It is said that only in the year 2020, more videos were created and uploaded on only one channel called YouTube than the entire history of mankind, the books that were published. So we are absolutely a visual generation. And children more so are very visual in their outlook. Traditional teachers will tell you that there are auditory, there are visual, and that there are kinesthetic learners. But let me tell you, with my experience, that most of them are still enamored by that visual, that medium. And today, as an educator, that's almost like a basic skill. How do you use the visual medium to communicate? And even if you are out there in a classroom, how do you visually communicate? One of the most traditional forms of teaching was storytelling. And somehow we seem to have, lost out on storytelling in classrooms. And stories are not told as much as, it should be, because children beautifully engage. Can teachers make films? Can teachers make great videos? Can teachers engage in the online medium? Now, that is going to be a very, very critical skill. So for anyone who's out there who's studying in a teacher's training college, or if you are teaching in a school, now remember, this is not a passing phase. That tomorrow when schools open up, you're going to go back into the classroom and you need to forget the visual medium. It's here to stay. And it's a skill that we need to learn to adapt to and to learn to create and engage children. You have a problem there because the children are exposed to so much of visual content that your content has to be as good, if not better, than what they're exposed to. So it's not just about showing off your face and your content. It's about how you make it engaging and exciting. So huge number of online tools that are available that can bring about engagement. And schooling today and in future, and more so higher education, is going to be a lot of remote. So that's the first point that I wanted to highlight on. The second one, and a very interesting one, is all of us would agree with the fact that it's not about the amount of information that we teach our children. Information is passé. We moved out of that era. It's no longer valuable because information is available to everybody. The accessibility of information is available. The skill that we need to learn to teach our children, and more importantly, acquire for ourselves, is knowledge management. Where do you find that right knowledge from? If you just go to Google and click any question, you're going to get millions of pages of answers. How do you analyze and how do you decipher from that information that's available? How do you decipher whether the information is right, relevant, and or it is concocted or cooked up? So how do you identify that? How do you manage that amount of information? An average teacher today, in the past, there were 40 notebooks that you had to evaluate. But today, the moment you go online, you're talking about hundreds of emails or, innumerable number of assignments that you have to handle online. So how do you manage that information? Systems and processes are available. But yet, one of the key challenges that future generations will have, and definitely teachers of the future will have, is how do you manage the amount of knowledge that there is? So in that space, the key skill in a knowledge-based society is knowledge management. How to find, evaluate, analyze, and apply that particular knowledge. So the faster we move away from the pen paper tests that we have, and the faster we move away from testing information to the era of managing knowledge, I think that's a skill that I see it's very relevant for educators. The third one is the least talked about in the education scenario, but whether you look at Maria Montessori, Rudolf Steiner, or even Jiddu Krishnamurti, or any one of those great thinkers of education who existed more than 100 years ago, they've always talked about emotional intelligence. They've talked about social and cultural intelligence. And that has become very, very relevant to our times today. When you look at statistics, it is said that 1 in 4 workforce of the future will be Indian. We always keep talking about our population as an advantage. And this population can definitely be an advantage if we can create a workforce for the world. I think we should stop these conversations about teaching in the mother, in the local language, or whether English is more important or the local language. There's no doubt at all that we need to preserve our culture, our heritage. We need to encourage local languages, whether it is Tulu or Kannada or Marathi or Malayali. We need to preserve our languages. And that's one of the things that our children need to learn up growing. But what they also need to learn up growing is to be global citizens. It's not enough to be an Indian citizen. Indians need to be ruling the world. And if they are to rule the world, we need to make them global citizens, sensitizing them to different cultures, different societies. And somehow this is one aspect of education which is not as relevant or as important, especially in school education. And this starts from the teachers. How do you encourage children to understand themselves, embrace diversity? And that's going to be the key to success in future, because I have no idea where my daughter is going to live 20 years down the line. None of us have any clue which country our children are going to grow up in. And even if they've grown up in Patna, you have no idea that they're going to ever live in Bihar in the future. So the key is to create children who are able to adapt to different parts of the world. So how are teachers and how is the curriculum including? So that's the third point. The fourth one is simpler, and I'm going to have Ninad and Dr. Pratima talk a lot more about it, is about virtual collaboration and teamwork. In the past, we used the word of teamwork, and that is so relevant. But today, teamwork has moved from the physical to the virtual. Today, our workspaces are more virtual, and they will continue to be that, because our collaborations, like, for example, the organization I run, at times I've had my editor sitting in Dubai, my director sitting in the US, and my actors are here in India, and we are collaborating over the past and making those films. And that's going to be, we thought we were, unique in the way we work. But if you walk into any large corporation in Bangalore, you realize that any big IT company has branches in 40, 50, 60 cities, and they're used to doing it. And that is a skill which you don't have to wait for a workplace. Why is math being only taught by Indian teachers? You could have international teachers teaching our children. You could have Indian teachers collaborating with teachers across the globe. We could have our students collaborating, and it is possible to do that. Very few schools that I have seen have the international collaboration programs happening. I think that should become very, very important. So teamwork and virtual collaboration is another key skill, and that's the fourth one. And the final one that I want to mention is a word which is a very Bangalore word. It's because we are a techie city. I call it geek acumen. It's an acumen of a techie. I've spent a large part of my life, because I studied engineering and I grew up with a lot of techies, and most of them are big time techies, not just here, but across the globe. There's something that I love about them. What I love about a techie is that no techie knows everything about any platform that they're working on. The moment they find a problem, they get excited. They've identified a problem. And then they go looking for solutions. Online communities, they search the web, they have conversations, they look for solutions. And I think that attitude of not knowing it all, accepting that you don't know it, and going and looking for solutions, that's an outstanding quality. And that's one of the reasons why the techies are almost about ruling the world today. It's their ability to accept the fact that you don't know it all. And that's the quality. And if I have to draw inference from it, is accepting, learning to learn is the inference that you draw from this. Our children don't need to learn everything. Our children need to learn how to learn. And there's no one better than a person developing a program or an entrepreneur starting off to teach you this lesson. Because when you set out on those journeys, you're not sure of the answers, but you know the questions. And I think that's very important. And I'm going to end on that note. It's not about the answers that our children know. Are we teaching them to ask the right questions? Because from then on, it's always about a journey of finding answers to those questions. So let me sum up. Teachers of the 21st century It's not very challenging. I think it's very exciting. If you have the ability to make, learning very exciting and teach through the visual medium, if you can manage knowledge, if you can inculcate social, emotional, and global intelligences for our children, because they should be ruling the world, at least with our population size, and working in teams, not just for yourself. In fact, I can go on, and it just occurred to me, teamwork. Unfortunately, our education system makes selfish individuals, because we give them training for 18, 20 years to become very selfish, because it's your assignment, your work, your project, your test, your grades, your promotion. It's always about you. And then eventually, once they have done all of this, and we've always praised them for their selfishness. It's a common thing that you hear a parent tell a child or a teacher tell, mind your own business. When there's another student who's actually not studying well, you never heard a student of a topper, a teacher telling the topper, saying, can you go and help that kid out because he's not doing well? But on the other hand, you tell them, you stay away from that bad influence. And once this 20 years of education is over, you put them in a workplace and tell them to work in a team. And which is very contrary to what training they got for almost 20, sometimes even 25 years. So teamwork is very critical, both from a teacher as well as a student point of view. And finally, what I spoke about, the geek acumen, our ability to learn. And if there is one skill that I want to stress on teachers, forget about what you know. Do you have an ability to learn? Because what you know today is not relevant tomorrow, because knowledge keeps changing. And can we move on to have this habit of saying, I'm a teacher, I don't know it, but can I learn along with my children? And I think that's the quality which is most required for educators in the 21st century. So with these opening comments and a very passionate inputs, I'm extremely passionate about this topic. I would want to move on to, the lady in the panel who's moved on from a very, exciting corporate career, a people career, right through her college corporate career. She was working in the HR, working with people. And Dr. Pratima moved on into the education space. And I would want to now request Dr. Pratima to share her thoughts and views on the topic, framework for educators in the 21st century. Dr. Pratima.
Absolutely. Wonderful, Sultan. Thank you so very much. That was absolutely a brilliant opening remark, and I thoroughly enjoyed each one of the factors that you mentioned. And probably all of us would, with no second thoughts, agree on it. And as a part of the opening remarks, I would want to endorse all the factors of what Sultan mentioned, plus also add a bunch of different aspects on the, on the fact of learning, particularly for the educators in the 21st century. We have heard it all. Learning is one of the aspects, and plus get to know the generation. Because while we work on as a part of the educators, we tend to get back to the conventional methodology and the very traditional approach altogether with the classroom. Of course, classroom is required, no second thoughts. But can we use more on an experiential fact? And absolutely agree, as a part of the group, as a problem solving, rather than just focusing on the individual aspect. Point number one. Point number two, the kind of the generation is so very fast and moving so rapidly that we will have to adapt the technology. One is the accessibility to the education. Next is the affordability across the things that are available, across the domains, irrespective of which geographical location that the person is, and also on the kind of consistency. Can I continue doing that? And at last is the quality of the output. It's extremely important to ensure all the four have been maintained relentlessly, and also keep looking forward for the next step ahead. That's what I would want to put it across as a part of the framework while we are going ahead to cater to the various different angles. That being said, I would also want to emphasize on, can we go ahead to do that right from the beginning? Probably the kind of an framework for the educators at the toddling, for the toddlers, then at the very early age, the preschool. What should be learned in the middle school and what should be emphasized on the high school? Today, we are very methodical in nature. So today, when you go to a Montessori, we more focus on the motor skills. How do you handle the things in the hand, etc. So as we move forward, can we also include the life skills right at that age? So when you go to a small kid of 5 years and tell them you need to be polite enough, I really don't understand what is being polite at the age of 5. So the life skills actually starts right at that age to enable them to understand what are the life skills particularly. You cannot just come to high school and say that no, problem solving skills, critical thinking, collaborative, etc. So if we can have the framework right at the different ages with the segregation for the educators as well at all these angles, plus whether be it linguistic, be it mathematics, etc., it would be absolutely brilliant approach altogether, embedding the, whether it's a global awareness or the financial angle. What is money? First of all, I don't think so we would ever teach anybody, a preschooler, of what is money. So even go ahead to teach us, as that. And also when it comes to the economic, financial, business, that is one of them. And also the civic sense. Can we go ahead to add a civic literacy at that particular age? That is also something which is very important. And the health, I don't think so we have emphasized more on even the health literacy. I think these are some of the aspects when it comes to the kind of global awareness, socio-cultural literacy, civic literacy, health literacy. These are the areas that I would want to go ahead to emphasize more and segregate at the early preschool, middle, and the high school. And as a part of the undergraduation, of course, the employability skills will have to take its shape, and tell them that, how do I choose my profession? And what should I do it? And we speak about, the kind of the 5Ws and 1H, etc. Great, I'm interested to become so and so, so and so. How do I want to do that? We have no clue about it. So if we can do that across all these steps right from the beginning, because education is not like an overnight, it is over time. If we can have a framework separated into various different modules, injected, embedded as a part of the education, I think the students will be super excited to learn, and every educator will also have a creative know-how on how to make it more interesting. I think these are some of the things that I would want to highlight on as a part of my opening remarks, complementing and also endorsing what Sultan has mentioned. And then let's continue speaking about the same thing. On to you, Sultan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Pratima. And I completely resonate with your thinking. And you brought about 2 or 3 extremely pertinent points, and we'll get deeper into that. You spoke about life skills, and I think it's extremely relevant that we delve into that a little more. And there are 2 other points that you mentioned, which I think are, not as in the main stage of education. One is civic sense, and the other one is health. And the pandemic has completely changed that perspective of health. What's the point of having a topper whose mental, wellness is not up to the mark? Or what's the point having a 40-year-old executive of a company whose physical health is giving problems? So inculcating health at a very early age is an integral part of education. And what would be the role of a teacher, and how do schools do that? You spoke about a framework. So, and I think it's so relevant that we will also pick up the topic of the NEP 2020 that has just come in. We will delve into that. And thank you so much for those wonderful points that you made. I'm going to go to the senior most panel in our, panelists. Mr. Jayasima sir, you've been around for almost 4 decades, and you've dedicated your life towards bringing excitement, if I would say, into education. So I'd love to hear from you, and all of us would love to hear from you, your opening comments, sir.
I am into education field for the last 30 years, I told you. When I started this training program, I thought I should be a different trainer. I learned magic. The whole idea of introducing magic in the teaching skills is you can make your teaching more effective. Communication becomes very easy, and children also understand better. They start asking questions. With this idea, I started using magic as a tool. And I also bring in games. I bring in a lot of different games So that through the games, we can give inputs to the child and encourage them to ask questions. As you rightly said in the beginning, encourage the children to ask the questions. That's also the, these are the things what I'm using. And the other idea what I just want all the teachers can do is they can use different tools to make their teaching more effective and they can hold the attention of the student. One is the magic. Magic is a wonderful tool. Everybody would like to see magic. If teachers can bring in magic in the classroom session, their teaching will be more effective and they can put in a lot of, give the information to the child. Learning becomes very easy and attention span also will increase. So that they can do it. And teachers, in my teaching, when I address teachers, I tell teachers, don't give the notes. Make the child to think. Encourage them to ask questions, make the child to think, so that, you know, once they start writing their own notes, they can give the same answer in different 10 formats. These are the things what I'm telling in my class. And I'm using tools like this. For example, this is a simple game. I ask the children to play. I will also play with them and I'll give a wonderful message. And this is another one. I just given Sultan wanted to show me some magic. I said he gave a very good thing. Out of that thing, something comes in the beginning. I can give a message. So I can, these are the simple. Now we say practice, practice, practice. When I play, simple technical tools I use, this rope and the ring and all. When I ask them to do certain magic, they say, "Sir, I cannot do it." Then they will only tell it needs practice. Then I tell them practice make man. They'll say practice make man perfect. I'll tell them no. I changed it. Perfect practice make man perfect. If you practice something imperfectly, how can it become perfect? Perfectly become imperfect. So this is the type of ideas I use. And what I tell is to be a more challenging teacher for the 21st century. These teachers should adopt more tools like this. They can bring in stories, they can bring in games, they can bring in puzzles. If they can bring in, children are more interested in this. Then we can start putting in giving the inputs to the child. Unless the teacher is motivated, we cannot make the child motivated. Unless the teacher is confident. In my workshop, mainly I make the child to build their confidence level and motivate them and inspire them. These are the things what I am doing. If these things we can bring it to the teacher, first we need to train the teacher. If the teacher is ready with these tools, then if they can do this, their definitely teaching will be very effective. And this is what I am doing.
Thank you very much, sir. That's extremely exciting. And I think what I really love about your work and your thoughts, your opening comments have been the simplicity. While we do talk about technology, while we do talk about a lot of advancements in the way we need to educate, need to teach, but what we should never forget is the simplicity or that human connect, which is one of the key factors for education and more so for an educator. And, some of the aspects that you stressed on is to make it very interactive. And I think the challenge is now more than ever so, because it is said that if an individual who wants to quit any habit, like smoking, for example, and stop smoking for 6 months, the chances are more than 95%. Research says that they will be able to quit. Now, remember, our school children are not used to going to school or seeing a physical teacher for almost 12 months. So they have gotten into an interesting habit, and that habit is to see a virtual teacher, not necessarily a physical teacher. And now more than ever before, when a child comes back to school this year, and it will continue in future, is how do you build that human connect and how do you make the classroom very exciting? And exciting doesn't mean that you need some very expensive, very big, technology in a classroom, even simple tricks. And I love the idea. You're probably one of the first few, magicians in the classroom, and I'm sure the children love every bit of your session. Yeah. So let me now move to Ninad. Ninad comes from a very illustrious corporate career, predominantly in the education space. And then he moved to becoming an entrepreneur and took up that challenge. An entrepreneur to solve a very simple, yet a very large problem. And one of the key areas of challenge for India, especially, is how do you, effectively teach a language, especially the English language. So Ninad runs Utter, a fantastic platform and a very well awarded platform, and he's solving a very important aspect of an educators in India is language, especially in English language communication. So I'm going to request Ninad, with his experience in the education domain and being an edupreneur, to share his opening comments. Ninad, please.
Thanks, Sultan. I really enjoyed, what I just heard, and I just want to take one or two cues. You spoke about, a problem solution approach of the engineers. I personally, I'm not an engineer, but I'm very, very, as a kid and, as a professional, I've always questioned, sometimes to the discomfort of my bosses or my investors. But I personally feel that, the problem solution approach or the, asking questions approach is very, very critical for the existence of humans. I mean, it's not about schools or... So you spoke about problem solution, and Jaisima sir just showed me magic, which I just love magic. And, he shows the solution and then makes the kid think about the problem. Okay, he's showing something and then he says, how did this happen? Right? So, it's a spirit, that you inculcate within a kid, okay, without telling them, without even uttering the words problem and solution, right? And and I personally feel, that it is high time, the schools start thinking about this approach, rather than people like us. The government needs to start thinking about education as a problem solution approach. And I'll tell you, one of the things which I've realized post COVID is, this approach now does not need infrastructure to build. Okay. So, all this while, problem solution approach in education, even if people had great ideas, okay, about solving certain problems, with the solutions that they had, they didn't have the money to build that infrastructure. So if you have to set up a school in Bombay, you need about 35 to 50 crores. So it's not the job of a Sultan or a Ninad or a Jaisima or, Dr. Pratima. It's not possible for us, right? But now, if you have a problem and you have a solution, you can go online and you can offer that solution for free for 1 year, and you can, embed that solution in the minds of the people, and they can start subscribing to you online. And I personally feel that this entire revolution has already started in the higher education space, where you see an upgrade, where you see startups like Masai School and Coding Ninjas, which are saying that, come to us for 6 months or a year, and we guarantee you, the jobs that you're seeking. And they're not looking at graduates. They're looking at people who can code. So the point that I want to make is, I just want to share my screen so that I just wanted to, showcase something to the team. When I say problem solution, one of the biggest fears that I have is, people who have been, who passed their class 10, or maybe who passed their class 5 in about 30 years back or 40 years back, are now planning for careers of students who might pass their class 10 15 years later. Okay, so there's a 70-year or a 65-year gap. Okay, so it's very important for people like us to educate ourselves that, what are we setting up schools for? So if you look here, I was raised at a time when, I knew that there was a clear career path for somebody who did commerce. There was a clear career path for somebody who did engineering. So, and I have seen my, parents actually do this. Okay, they've not been here, but, do this all their lives. And today, a kid is born for a job that does not exist. I think, it's very scary for somebody like me, because, I am unable to guide my own daughter. on what career she should undertake, because unless I know, what are the careers that are emerging. And I think somewhere, if you look at the schooling system, we need to build this ability amongst the schooling system, to start uh, addressing, this big issue that is going to, that is happening in education, and that, it's going to change the way education needs to be imparted. So this was one. The second very important part that I want to talk about is, we don't take textbooks seriously in this country. Okay. I personally feel, a textbook in a school is treated like a Bhagavad Gita or a Quran or a Bible. Okay. That's how important textbook is. So what you put into the textbook, is what millions and millions of kids are going to learn. So you need to understand the importance of textbooks. If you create a textbook on how to code, millions of kids in this country, in 6 months will learn how to code, because schools in this country are based on compliance. So whatever innovation you want to do, all that, you need to bring it down to the textbook. You need to say that if I am to create learners who can speak English, then I need to build a textbook, which teaches them how to speak English. Okay, I need to build a course curriculum. So somewhere, I feel that, all of us know, and even the people in the government, well-meaning people, we all talk about changing education. But I personally feel whatever change you need to do in education, you need to list it down, and you need to build textbooks, to actually achieve that change. So that was one of the points that, I wanted to talk about, and then, I'll talk about more things as we move forward.
Thank you, Ninad. I think that was extremely relevant, and I think the fact that picture says 1,000 words, that cartoon that you had put up communicated so much, and that key word there that you pick up is that we're preparing children for a time and an age where we have no clue about. We're preparing them for a world we have no clue about, and a job which does not even exist. We've not even heard of it. In fact, even today, when we look at ourselves and the society around, there are innumerable jobs which I had never heard of when I was studying, or even when I started my career. So, data analytics or UX and UI, or, just the whole world of the Google and the Android apps, and the gaming industry, logistic management through a tech platform, because we thought logistics was about trucks and buses in the good old days. And it's all about, online platforms these days. And the way banking has transformed, the fintech has transformed the financial institutions. You're absolutely right. And it's just, one of the things that we've all noticed and is going to be faster is the rate of change is going to be much faster than we can ever comprehend. It's not going to take a generation for things to change. While the first telephone took almost 80 or 100 years to reach different parts of the world, and all of us know that it definitely didn't reach every part of India, but the mobile took less than a decade to reach almost every nook and corner of this country. And that's the kind of
thing. Takes about an hour.
and if you launch an app today, it probably takes a day for it to reach the whole world. Right. So you also brought about another very interesting point, Ninad, which is about today, the world allows you an opportunity to reach out to the world. In the past, if I had an idea, there were too many limitations of finances, limitations of governmental approvals and restrictions. But today, a good idea can reach the world. And staying on the context of educators for the 21st century, I think one of the best opportunities that's out there for good educators is you can now teach the whole world. You don't have to restrict yourself to only teaching in your classroom. So wonderful points there, and thank you for those lovely comments. I'm going to go to Dr. Pratima, and Pratima has spent a lot of her time in life skills education. And the new education policy 2020, the national education policy in 2020 also highlights a lot of importance on life skills education. So Pratima, could you talk us through the role of an educator when it comes to the imparting of life skills You mentioned right from a very early age, though you work in the high school. So could you talk us through the importance and how do we prepare educators to inculcate life skills in children?
Awesome. Okay, great. Yes, that will be something which is a very interesting question as well, Sultan. So whenever we speak about the education and the life skills, I would want to, of course, currently I am more emphasizing on the high schools and also on the undergraduates. But I would want to start this as early as possible, as I told you in my opening remarks, that the framework of the life skills should start at a very early age rather than introducing them at the age of middle school or in the high school, etc. So life skills, I mean, if we all remember, we all studied moral education when we were in school. We were told stories, we were told about how do you develop a bunch of different things, the problem solving, what are the different morals, etc. So in the similar fashion, just like a moral education, if we can come up with a life skills by itself, today, particularly, when we speak about the today skills, or if we want to go ahead to have a futuristic perspective of collaboration, today, when it comes to critical thinking or a problem solving or any of the emotional intelligence, first of all. So generally what we tend to also do as a kids, okay, let me start right from the beginning. These are the parental behaviors also, and to a greater extent, teachers also play a very, very vital role. Whenever the kid is crying out of a pain or anything like that, the first thing that you do is, and if at all he is a boy, you're not supposed to cry. You're a boy, how can you cry? So that is something which is very bad. And how can you stop somebody not expressing their emotions? And I mean, letting them know, saying that self-management, whether it's a cleanliness or the kind of concentration. Okay, one of the aspect of the life skills is also about concentration. I would want to highlight on this. We have been listening, concentrate, focus. Okay, but have we taught what is concentration? How can you do something when you have not been taught? How can you be good at it when you have not practiced it? So right from the beginning, if we can teach them, to tell them what is first of all concentration, okay? And say for instance, I'll give you a wonderful example. While Jaisimha was doing the magic, even I being an adult was super engaged. It's like I was just looking at the things. Can we look at that engagement angles to bring these abstract concepts of emotions and also the concentration part of it, or problem solving? These are some of the self-management right from the beginning. It's not about emotional intelligence today. When people come to the corporate, we go ahead to teach them about what are the different activities. Experiential learning is all about overload of the activities as such. But I feel that these are some of the life skills given in a specs, given in a snippets right from the beginning. Recognizing your emotions. What am I feeling at this moment of time? Am I thinking creatively? So basically we lose out on the kind of a creativity as we grow older. So if all of us are given a paper of, a sheet of paper and tell, okay, now why don't you draw? So we keep thinking what to draw. And we just feel that, okay, the utmost drawing is more from an angle of a kid. But even if you just give a paper and a crayon to a kid, they are so innovative in nature. Where did we lose in the entire track is also one of the very important aspects, creativity. And again, creativity is an overrated word in our society. Creativity is not about art or music or writing poems or a literature. Creativity is something which you can do innovatively in any small magnitude. So creativity and telling them that, look, anything that you would do something very different out of your own idea is also something which is important to embed. And we spoke about global awareness, right? Global awareness, and 1 out of 4 people, and we would have a great lot of workforce in the next coming decade. We will be the #1 workforce in the entire world. With that, we will have to ask a question: how many of us are really innovators? We are more service-oriented people. We are more solution-oriented people. But when it comes to innovation, we always go for a Google or an Apple or any other Samsung or all of these brands. But when it comes to India, how many of us have really innovated something, come up with an idea to implement and solve a specific problem? That becomes a very vital aspect to understand that we will have to nurture innovation right from the beginning, which is also a part of thinking process. Information, great. We have an accessibility to information today. If you remember in one of the aspects that you mentioned about the knowledge management. So what I would want to emphasize and wrap up in this particular question is, while we speak about emotional intelligence, recognizing emotions, expressing it, create a platform. Next is on the thinking pattern as a part of the knowledge management, come up with the different ideas and innovations and engage people to think forward. So with respect to information, today, okay, great. I know when did if I just Google, when did India become independent? 1947, August 15, that's an information. But knowledge is what led me to that particular aspect. I can go ahead to speak and go ahead, collate a lot of skills around it, the know part of it, management. Thinking. The thinking pattern, you will definitely not get any of these answers in Google, particularly when I ask you, what would have happened if India would not have got independence in 1947? You cannot get these answers from Google. Can we go ahead to answer that from an analytical perspective, looking at the historical data analysis? And today data sciences is so big. Can we go ahead to analyze what would have happened? And that can happen only with economic data, financial angle of it. What are the developments that we have done? Rather than being the walking libraries and Googlers, I think this thinking pattern should be embedded as a part of the life skills education and creating a platform of thinking ahead. And that is a part of thinking. So if we can embed the part of self-management, career of what is intelligence, what is the kind of the options that I have as a part of my occupation so that I can think and implement, and also the financial literacy. These are the aspects. And of course, the social skills, the collaboration, also from the respect of the influences that I have in my life. So these are all the life skills modules that I would want to emphasize on to embed as a part of education right from the beginning in the different snippets, giving them an angle of understanding these abstract concepts rather than just overloading at the end of the phase or introducing them to a very different world, analyzing that there is a world within you. So explore that world to start with will be a great angle and a great point to start with.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Pratima. You're talking about it being a continuous process that starts at a very early age, including whether it's global awareness, creativity, thinking skills, self-awareness, problem solving, all of these skills, and to be brought into the classroom via the teacher, especially in small formats, whether it is magic or whether it is by experiential activities or by thought-provoking questions. These are all ways of inculcating life skills, and that's a very interesting perspective. Mr. Jayasimha, let me come to you. I'm sure you're loved by the children in the classroom. My question to you is, how do the other teachers in the schools relate to what you do? And have you found any resistance in your experience from teachers to adapt to innovative ways? Yours is you're using magic or storytelling is one of the ways, but there are multiple ways. Talk us through your experience of how open are educators? What is the kind of resistance that you see from educators where, when it comes to making learning a lot more exciting for children?
Okay. When I talk to teachers about using different skills like magic, puzzles, games, every teacher wants to do this. They want to learn, they want to adopt. The only problem what they have is how to connect with the subject what they are teaching. That we can always, like Dr. What Pratima she told, we can always think and develop a separate system where we can link what I am telling. I can easily think and adopt it. And I never had a resistance. In fact, every teacher would love to adopt these things. Only thing is they want somebody who can help them. Now, technology is so wide and it is so open. Magic is not at all a secret. Every magic is open, and behind every magic there is a logic. Without logic, there is no magic. and they are taught free of cost through YouTube, through so many things. Everything is taught. In fact, magician, they would love to teach magic. Only thing we need teachers, we need to go approach and start learning magic, and we only have to think how I can connect my subject to the what I'm teaching, that they can learn. But Sultan sir, I never had a resistance. They would love to adopt this. In fact, games, puzzles, all these things they want. And in my classroom, I take the children to the ground, play games, and give a message there. They want this. They want more to be outside like this and activity oriented. So if the teachers can make them more activities, classroom becomes very effective.
Right. I think that's very pertinent points there. Children will engage if it is interesting and exciting for them. And for any teacher or an educator who wants to learn to make their classrooms a lot more interactive and a lot more engaging, the knowledge is available. All you need to do is take that initiative, either look up on the internet or reach out to practitioners like Mr. Jayasimha. They are all open and willing to teach. I think that whole question is about, is the educator taking that initiative? And I think if you have the initiative today, you have the knowledge and the necessary resources available to equip you. There is one particular point over here which Mr. Jayasimha brought out, and that was about every teacher is more worried about how do I link it to the curriculum. And I think that is where we also need to, as educators, realize that we don't have to link everything to the curriculum. It is okay for our children to get good learning, which does not get tested at the end of the year from an exam point of view. I have an important question I just saw on the chat box that has come in around this topic, which I'm going to take later. But Ninad, let me come to you. As an entrepreneur who's come up with a wonderful solution for a very important problem, talk us through and tell us your experience of when you reach out to institutions, when you reach out to organizations, governmental as well as private. The B2C model works well for you because there is the individual interested in learning and engages with you. From an institutional point of view and from an educator point of view, what is the kind of response you get? And talk us through not just your own experience with Utter, but your own, a lot of other edupreneurs and entrepreneurs who've come up with great solutions for education, but somehow they have not penetrated the classroom and they've not become a part of a teacher's toolkit. So can you talk us through that particular challenge that edupreneurs like you face?
So, very early in my educational career, one of the things that one of the ideas that I always discussed with my corporate team, sales team, was why do tuition classes get paid more than schools? Okay, it's a very, very profound question, that I kept asking my team members, that why does a school charge X and a tuition class charge 5X and walk away with it? Okay, and somewhere, you might always look down upon the tuition class, but the tuition class in their own limited way are offering a solution to a problem. Okay. And they're kind of guaranteeing that solution, that if you come to me with 75%, I can take you to 85%. The cost of this solution is going to be 1 lakh rupees. Okay. Somehow, no, our schools are, unable to promise that under the garb of saying that I am a knowledge creator, I provide knowledge. I personally, if you ask me, I did my entire education for material gains. And I think 99.9% of the people in this country have done that in their lives. But somehow, no, we take this kind of moral high ground, saying that schools should be doing this. I personally feel, that schools should be solving a problem, and whatever that problem is, they should be honest about it and they should charge for it. So, for example, we know for a fact that, to solve the problem of education for the poor, the government is, spending thousands of crores. Okay. So I don't think, the issue is about money. I think the issue is about attitude. That's point number one. Point number two is, I'll tell you my own journey in Utter. We started with when we decided to set up an English language learning app. Okay. we took language out of the picture. Okay, we said we are a functional fluency app. Okay, so we want to solve problems. And what is the problem that we want to solve? We want to solve the problem of expression, okay, in do or die situations. Now, I am not defining those do or die situations. Now I have defined, but initially I didn't. And let me be very honest with what my learners asked me to teach. Okay. My learners asked me to teach obviously about how to speak at interviews. Okay. My learners asked me to teach them how to speak with their boss. But my learners also asked me to teach them how to speak to girls. And girls asked me how to speak to boys. Okay. Now, we don't need to look down upon the solution that they were asking. Okay, and I think that solution that they were asking has nothing to do with language. Okay, it is everything to do with expression and self-esteem. Okay, language is just that medium that I want to enter a peer group, and language is not allowing me to do that. Right, I have an aspiration peer group to enter, and language is not allowing me to do that. I'll give you an example. One of our learners asked, what does ASAP mean? Okay. I mean, this is not a language problem, right? This is a problem now where a boss must have asked him, give me this ASAP. And the guy must have been wondering, like, ye file ka naam hai. What is this? Like, what is ASAP? So I personally feel the day we launched this as a functional fluency app, and post-COVID, we pivoted even more deeper into solving a problem by offering a solution. Like, for example, we used to teach interview skills, but now we launched a interview boot camp. Okay, so it's a 1-month program, where we will teach you, how to get a job. Okay, by creating your resume and applications and all that. And I'll tell you, the day I did that, I've signed 5,000 learners with institutions. Okay, when I used to go to them saying, I teach language fluency, they were reacting exactly how parents react to their solution. Aap kya karte ho yaar? Like, I don't know what you do. Why should I pay for it? But the moment I went to an institution and I told them that, look, you are offering guaranteed job to your learners, I will contribute 10% of that effort. Okay, by you are teaching them employability skills for 2,000 hours. You give me 20 hours, I will help them express those skills in the interview. Now, this is something that everyone understood, right? I understand that there are a lot of deep theories on which we are working on to make this change. But I think how we express that change to people is very, very important. We should express that change in a very idiot-proof way. Okay, we should say that you have this problem, I'm offering this solution. Okay, the way you've constructed that solution might have deep academic theories, but when it goes to the person who wants to buy it, he needs to clearly understand that this solution is going to help me do this, right? So somewhere, like what Sultan was saying, that we have a lot of good intentions, but I think communicating those intentions in a very material, as a material outcome, okay, is very, very important for all of us. And I think it's just a question of flipping your mindset and saying that, look, I have this solution, but I don't know how to project it to that learner. Let me find out that part of the problem, where I'll say, you have this small problem, I have this small solution. Even for the smallest problems, people will, pay you or, use your solution, but they need to just identify which problem this solution is solving. Somewhere, a lot of education in schools or, colleges has always been about a kind of a hazy solution, but post-COVID, right? Whether it is higher education, whether it is schools, like I saw a video of a parent going on live, okay, saying that, for all these years, I used to think that my kid goes to the best school in the city. And then I saw the teachers live. Okay. Then I realized, that, I don't know what I'm paying for, right? Now, I'm not saying it's a problem of teachers. They were also struggling trying to teach online. But I think, you know, a much deeper introspection needs to now, happen amongst the traditional institutions. All of us, I am also like a traditional educational, I also have a traditional educational background. And which is the reason why, post-COVID, we did a lot of deep introspection. We realized that, the more focused we are about the solution and the more clearly we explain that solution, we should be able to generate adoption amongst youth, right?
Fantastic.
I want my youth to get jobs, but if I don't communicate it in the right manner, okay, it's not about money. It's about helping them get jobs. But I need to communicate it right. That I come in here and I help you like this. If you do this, now you'll get a job. If they understand it, no, they pay for it and they'll take the service.
Right. I think a lot of what you just spoke about is such a different perspective to the way we look at education. If you ask an average teacher or a school, they believe their role is to complete the curriculum. They believe their role is to complete a few tests and exams. And that's what they think education is. They don't look at it as if they are solving a need or a problem. A math teacher thinks that his job is to complete the curriculum and solve, children solve X problems. But is that eventually going to give the skill to a child to handle his finances in his personal life better in future? We are not even bothered. So what you've talked about is an extremely important shift, which has happened out there. It happens in the industry. It has happened in the industry. It's already happened at the edupreneur world, where we are solving different problems. But the schools still seem to not focus on the problem, but focus more on doing a bunch of tasks that have been provided to them. I think very beautifully put, Ninav. Thank you so much for that.
Sultan, one point. I think, you should start a school of life, 1 hour every day online. And you should say that I am solving this problem with the schools or not solving people. Hey, I'm telling you.
I think that's a good business plan for Dr. Pratima and me to do that. And Dr. Jayasima to say that, how do you make teaching exciting? And you will do a great job of it. So let me pick up some questions. The first question, I have is, how should an educator balance between the short-term goals, that is, a child ensuring that they ace their exams, and more important, long-term goals of pursuing life skills? So I'm going to go to Dr. Pratima, that question. How does a teacher balance? Because they've been told that they have exams and children need to ace the exams, and that's how you're judging a child's or a school's performance. And how do you balance between that and life skills, which is so difficult to, evaluate in the traditional formats?
Yeah. So that's a wonderful thing. Particularly in the life skills, there is nothing like, according to me, there is nothing like a short term or a long term as such. And the life skills is not for assessments. You cannot really assess, because the human behavioral dynamics is extremely dynamic. And what am I today is not what I am at 5 o'clock in the evening right now. So basically, we will have to build upon the kind of a long-term perspective, creating the short-term and the situational awareness. So life skills is definitely not for assessment. And again, when it comes to acing the subjects, it is more on the kind of assessments what we bring in over here even today is, it's a kind of a peer pressure and the fear factor. So I think, first of all, we will have to pull out that particular notion and influence on the parents and teachers, injecting to the students that there is an examination, there is an assessment, you will be done that, you will be graded, etc. That itself is a life skill. So if we can look at the knowledge, what you have accumulated, and the skills of how do you use it, if you can connect both of these zones, that itself becomes the kind of a life skills. And that's according to what I look at it in a very, very holistic perspective. And again, life skills is something which they will have to embed every now and then. How did you feel yesterday? How was your class? What was the reflections that you have had? That itself is a life skills for me. And coming on to embedding through the various different angles of it, did you have an opportunity, we call this as a kind of a blank sheet exercise, wherein what are you feeling at this moment of time? That's about it. I'll just ask all the kids that, are you feeling excited? Are you feeling low? Do you have a physical, any of the ailments, etc.? All that stuff. And are you able to concentrate? Can you come up and tell me what is concentration? Are you able to engage? Are you able to have an active listening? All these are a part of the life skills. And this will have to be questioned again and again by the educators every now and then in the class while it is the subjects are being taught. So while I go ahead to teach Pythagoras theorem or a hyperbola or a parabola, it is more on an angle of how did you even analyze, how did you even think about it. So if we can give a practical application, that is where the life skills come as an angle of putting my concentration into it, thinking, analyzing and solving a specific problem. If you can look at, let me give you an example. Very, very nice question that one of the students asked me while I was having a career orientation, that why do we think that the mobile phone, why do we think that the mobile phone is vertically rectangular in shape? Why not it is in any other shape? Why not in circle? Why not in square, etc.? It's a practical question. I, as an educator, will just go ahead to say, think about it and come back tomorrow morning. So you will, you're not, and again, when it comes to the education, we will have to emphasize that I'm not looking for information here. I'm looking of your thought process. If educators can bring the real time problems on every day to make children think, and what is that I am looking on an everyday basis, that will be a wonderful aspect to embed life skills along with your technology and your subject.
Yeah, it's a very interesting one. Just what caught my attention was that question the student asked you. I've always wondered, my eye is round, the cameras are always round, and our images are always square. And I think I'm living with that question. But you're right, how do you, in focusing on the exams, that whole journey can be a life skills journey itself. And I think very beautifully put. There's the next question, which I think I will take it. How can teachers of the 21st century take inspiration from the Gurukul system? I think I'm going to take that because it's my personal interest, and I've been studying the Gurukul systems. I want to talk about one particular aspect of how the Gurukul system was structured. And I think there's a lot of value for us to understand that and implement it in today's day and age. The Gurukul system had 6 levels of teachers. The first level of a teacher was called the Adhyapak. An Adhyapak was someone who gave information. So for example, if I'm an Adhyapak, this is my iPad, that's my phone, that's my bookshelf. I'm giving information. So you're giving out information, and that's the Adhyapak's role. The second level of a teacher is called an Upadhyay. Upadhyay is a surname that we've all heard. Traditionally, they must have been the second levels of instructors at the Gurukul system. And an Upadhyay gives an understanding to the information. So that's my bookshelf, and I keep books in my bookshelf and not my kitchen utensils over there. So there is an understanding. This is a chair, and I sit on it, and I use the chair to work, right? So that's an understanding for the information. The third level of a teacher is called an Acharya. And we all are aware of probably one of the most famous acharyas, the Dronacharya, who taught archery, right? An acharya is someone who gives skills, right? And remember, the acharya has been kept at a much higher level than both the Adhyapak and the Upadhyay, right? And somewhere, if you look at the way we run our modern schools, an art teacher of a teacher of dramatics, a teacher of, sport is clearly not in the same level as a math teacher, because somehow we've inverted that pyramid. So an acharya teaches skills. And today's day and age, what Ninad is doing is a skill, whether it's, communication, or, using a bit of magic or different kinds of skills that we use. So that's an acharya's role. There's a fourth level of a teacher called the Pandit. Now, the Pandit used to give an insight into the knowledge and the skills and that information that the students had. Now, insight is, for example, that I'm sitting on a chair. Now, there are different kinds of chairs. Now, this is a chair in my study room, and it could be a chair in Ninad's, MD's cabin. Now, it's a chair, all right, but just because Ninad's, admin staff sat in the chair doesn't make him the MD of the company or the CEO of the company. So there is an insight into a different chair. Now, the prime minister of the country sits on a chair. Anyone sitting on that chair doesn't become a prime minister. So it's an insight into that entire, the skill and the knowledge that you've got. There is a fifth level called the drishta. Now, this is something, these are levels that we don't even rarely think about going in our education system. A drishta gives foresight. Now, if I'm talking to a young child and tell them that the future prime minister of this country is sitting in one of the classrooms or playing in one of the grounds in the country today, now that's a foresight. Now, how do I, as an educator, look at children in my classroom? Do I look at them as these 12-year-olds, or am I looking at one as the MD of a company, another young, future astronaut, or a future politician, or a minister in the country? How do I look at them? So that is the foresight, right? And knowledge, information, skill can also have a foresight. Insight would be, I have a knife, but I can use the knife to cut an apple or to cut through a person. Now that's the insight, whereas a foresight is, how do I teach values to my child and not just using the knife? There's a last level, and which is the most profound level according to me, in a Gurukul system, and he was called the Guru. And Guru was the only one who didn't teach in a Gurukul system, because the philosophy and the logic was, the Guru does not teach anyone. The student, the Guru appears when the student is ready. Right? And a lot of us in our own entrepreneurial journeys, and I can relate to a few people as my gurus, they didn't even matter to me because I knew them for so many years. But there was a certain time in your life when you encountered a certain question or a certain challenge, both in personal or professional lives, and that's when you are ready to seek that knowledge and you go to the Guru. So if you take some wisdom from this, I think we are all trying to make better adhyapaks in our schools today, and children don't need that, because the world's biggest adhyapak today is Google, and adhyapak gives all that information that you would ever want. So we need to move beyond that. We need to create more upadhyayas that give an understanding, knowledge management. We need more acharyas, and I think if we can do that at the school and college levels, we would have done a great job. Because in their journeys, through their parents, through one of those teachers, they will always find those panditas that will give them the insight. And that's been a little bit of my understanding of what's happening in the Gurukul system. Let me move on to the next question.
I would definitely want to comment you before you can go ahead. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Hats off to the entire aspect of what you did mention. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And I think there is a lot of wisdom in, when you're building something new. I think it's very important to stay strong to our foundation, to our roots. Pick up the learning. It may not be visible because the foundation is very deep. You might have a new structure. But I think building with the strength of our traditional learning has a lot to do with education. So if we can pick up on that, I think it'll be great for the way for the 21st century to go forward. Ninad, here's a question that I would like you to take. How can assessments be made more meaningful to ensure it becomes a feedback system or a powerful tool for educators in achieving their goals? Assessment systems is something which is highly both politicized because of the examination systems that we have, and it's not necessarily a tool for improving education today. It's just an assessment tool. So I'll throw that question to you, Ninad. How do you use that as a tool to improve education?
So, see, the first thing is, we need to differentiate between assessment and testing. Okay. With what limited experience I have had with schools, one of the things that I've very clearly seen is assessment is always positioned as a test. And once you position assessment as a test, which means you can never assess the student because the student is always on a defensive. So, it's very important that we need to build mechanisms in a classroom where assessment can happen without the knowledge of the students even understanding that there's an assessment happening, right? So that's the best way to assess somebody. So, for example, when so I'll just give an example of cricket because that's what I love. Jasprit Bumrah was bowling in one of the playgrounds in Ahmedabad, 10 years ago. And one of the scouts of Mumbai Indians happened to get stuck at a signal from where he could see that playground, right? And he saw this guy bowling, and he, went to the playground there and he said that, who's this guy? I want to, check out who this guy is. And he asked him to come, and, then the rest is history. The point is, if Jasprit Bumrah had come into a camp, as a 18-year-old, with all these Maharathis sitting, and they would have told him that, boss, now you bowl, either you'll get selected or you'll get rejected. He would have 100% bowled back, right? So the point is, that we need to, as teachers and educators, we need to relook at assessment. And so, for example, I have a friend called Prasad Ram who runs a startup called Guru, in the US. And, he said that, once a student logs into my platform, okay, the assessment has begun. He does not have to undertake a single test. What he watches, what he reads, how he, responds, what comments he makes, where he clicks, that's the assessment that is happening, right? And he says, if a student is there on my, website for about a week, I should be able to clearly assess the student and, tell the teacher that, this is a kid who loves physics, and he loves physics by watching videos, and he watches these kind of videos, and this is the kind of content that needs to be, delivered to this kid. Unfortunately, in the traditional schools, such mechanisms are not really available. But I think, there's a big opportunity in, building platforms which can assess students without their knowledge. And that assessment has to be constant and continuous, right? It has to be constant and continuous, and very, very clearly, it has to be differentiated from positioning it as a test. Okay, so these are the two things that the feedback mechanism is something that needs to be undertaken of an assessment which is done without the knowledge of the learner, and that's the real assessment. And I think that fundamental shift needs to happen, in the way we look at assessments in this country.
Right. That's a wonderful point, and a very nice way of. In fact, in the past, especially, we had a system called the CCE, a continuous comprehensive evaluation, got killed because of lack of knowledge or understanding, and we didn't use any technology for that. The key points that come out from your response, Ninad, have been that if a child is in the limelight for the test, then the performance is going to be very different. So can it be in a regular process? It's a continuous process. And can there be processes that are built using technology that very seamlessly, while the child is learning, pick up those pointers and then share it back to the child and to the educator, so that that assessment becomes a tool to help the child, not to question a child or not to judge a child. I think judging a child is a better word that I can use for today's assessment formats that are happening. Thank you for that. There's one more question. I think I can take two more questions. I'm going to throw this question to both Dr. Pratima and to Jaisimha sir. What are the challenges and opportunities for adapting to the 21st century skills by teachers? What do you see are the challenges? And Dr. Pratima, you can talk us through both the government schools as well as the private schools. What are the challenges you see, and what are the opportunities you see for adapting to the 21st century skills?
Sure. So I'll actually take it up and highlight predominantly on the urban and the rural sectors over here. Very wonderful question. So what has been the biggest issue, particularly the distinction between the urban and the rural is, urban is wherein the affordability is not a problem, infrastructure is not a problem. So I would definitely endorse what Jaisimha had actually spoke a couple of minutes ago, that all the educators are very welcoming. They are definitely open to learn and adapt. But When it comes to rural sector, they are not able to access this infrastructure. So government has got a great role to play over here on the accessibility, point number one. Next is affordability. Because of the various different distinctions, the kind of economic background that they come from, the affordability definitely does matter. So even if I establish an infrastructure in the rural sector, be it educators who would enable the student community, affordability is something that we will have to focus on. With that, the consistency, the quality of the education would come at the end of it though. The third point is the kind of consistency. Today, if I can give you or supply you a bunch of different gadgets or computers, etc., can I go ahead to consistently ensure that it is maintained and it can be utilized in the next 3 years? That is where the consistency definitely plays a very, very vital role in the rural sector. And at last is the quality. So all of us educators come from various different backgrounds. Have we enabled them with the right information? And also when you mentioned about learn how to learn, upgrade yourselves, have we provided that platform for the rural educators, particularly to upgrade them? Again, it comes back to the same roots. How do I do that? Can I apply the MOOC platforms? How many educators really know about MOOC platforms, particularly in the rural? I'm not even, sector, no second thoughts. They are all very, very good. They are available because they are exposed. But rural sector are not exposed. Can we introduce these aspects of accessibility, affordability, consistency, and also on maintaining the quality to enable these educators to make sure that all this reaches and they enable the student community? If one teacher is able to, if we can enable one teacher, think about the influence that they have in hundreds of students. And I think government has got a very, very crucial and a vital role to play in these 4 angles to make sure we connect all the dots. That's
right.
2 pieces from my end.
Thank you, Dr. Pratima. I'll go with the same question to Mr. Jaisinha. What are the challenges that you see in and opportunities that you see in adapting to the 21st century skills for the educators?
Sir, my experience and my challenges are, as far as the urban area is concerned, actually they have accessibility, people are ready to go and they are willing to. When you go to the rural place, they simply love it, they want. People who really want to help them educate, they are not able to get people like that who can really help them. When I go to rural side, what happened? They welcome. Urban places, what happens? They are very busy with completing their curriculum. When I say, sir, even in government school, when I go and ask in Bangalore, sir, I will take a free class for 10th standard to motivate the children. They say, no, we have no time. We have to complete the syllabus. This is the problem in urban side. Whereas rural side, actually, there is no problem. They welcome you. If somebody can teach mathematics, they welcome. They'll say, come on, do it. We want it. Somebody who can teach better than me, if somebody is there, they welcome it. So rural side, they are finding it difficult to people to find the people. Here, it is not, we are ready to go, but they are not. They are busy in completing this is the challenge I am facing.
Fantastic. I think of what you're saying, there's an opportunity because you have open-minded, educators in the, the smaller districts and in the rural, because they're more open to adapting to learning and growing.
Yes.
Whereas there could be a certain mindset in the larger cities and in the bigger towns of the country. And I think, Dr. Pratima, you were talking about accessibility and affordability. And do you want to add something?
Yes, I wanted to actually add what Mr. Jaisinha mentioned, particularly the rural sector. I have personally witnessed that the teachers have been given so many tasks of administration that focusing on the learning and teaching itself is just, the lacking.
Yeah, right.
Overload work administration. Midday meals, take care of that, take care of this. So much of administrative works, because we will have to nominate a couple of administrators to look forward for, to understand and also to deliver these aspects, and not for teachers. Teachers are supposed to focus on learning and teaching, not on administration of the entire infrastructure of the school. I think that's where government have to take a call and emphasize to ensure that teachers are only for teaching, not for anything else.
Right. I think we've got some great examples. If you take the traditional FMCGs like the Unilevers or the ITCs of the world, they've managed, or the Coke, they've managed to penetrate to the most deepest part of the country and the most rural part and sell their products. If you look at the more modern trade and modern platforms, Amazon is now in some very, very remote parts of the country, delivering through some very innovative ways, which is a physical and a digital way of delivering, where you can order in your local Kirana store. You've got some great examples. And I think technology actually is a very affordable and an accessible tool for education. And, I visualize a time which should have happened, but has not yet. A time when you don't need to have all the subject teachers in a classroom. You could choose the best in the country and create lesson plans and let the children learn from those. Whereas on the ground, you've got a sports teacher, you've got a activities teacher, you've got somebody who's clearing doubts for you. So I think the teachers would also need to learn that they don't have to do it all. And somehow the government believes, especially in government schools, that one teacher should do election duty, census duty, they have to do midday meal, they have to do teaching as well. And I think that's a challenge with the government schools. With the private schools, the problem is that they're too closed. They don't share, they don't, I've always at very large conferences of principals, I probably am a little unpopular because I ask some tough questions. And one of the tough questions for me is, if you think you're the best school in the country, why is it that you're not running the best education platform? And why is it that only 1,000, 2,000 children get benefited from your so-called best practices? And why was it not shared, or why is it not being shared? So there is a huge opportunity for collaboration. There are, of course, phenomenal centers of excellence in the country. We don't have to look far. We don't have to go outside. There's an opportunity for them to step forward and share. There are a lot of, educators and governments that are waiting to, learn and grow. So I think technology and open-mindedness of educators. And I think if I have to end, I'm going to end with the last question for Ninad. If I have to end with my statement over here on this question, I think if educators, especially the ones who consider to be better off than the others, or who take pride in their schools and their educational institutions' quality, I think they need to get a lot more open mind. Because there's one question that I've always lived with: why should entrepreneurs create the biggest education platforms, and why not some of the best education institutions in the country? It's simply because they are not open and they don't consider the whole world as their students. Only the ones who got admission and paid their fees as their student. I think if we can open up those minds, there's a lot of knowledge that can be unlocked, and a lot of improvement in quality can happen in this country. So Ninad, let me end with you with the final question of this particular panel. I want you to put on a thinker's hat because you like solving problems. You did mention about this point that you choose not to, you yourself are not very sure how to direct your own child because you have no clue about the future, right? So if you were to wear on that innovator's hat and talk about a couple of inputs or insights for the educators to prepare themselves for the 21st century, I would leave you with that question.
So I'll since we spoke about my daughter, I just want to use that example. My daughter, when she finished her 12th, she obviously, like everyone else, was thinking of going to the, best college, where everyone else aspired to go and all that. And, she wanted to fix her career path, post 12. And we all knew, including her, that she had no clue what she wanted to do, right? So we sat down with her. I told my daughter that you, me, and her mom, we are a team, and we need to solve this problem for you. And we told her that we believe that you have no idea, what career you want to get into, and it's absolutely okay. There's no stress. You don't have to decide on a career right now, but I would rather want you to think of, can you spend the next 4 years in learning to think in the right manner. Okay, can you build a way of looking at the world, okay, where you should be able to decide for yourself what you would want to do. We would like to invest your next 3 to 4 years, okay, in that activity, because I don't think that you're going to find solutions in class 12, which many adults don't find for themselves at the age of 50, right? कि मुझे करना क्या है life में. So one of the I would say a kind of a courageous decision that we took was we invested in making her think. Okay, and we told her that that's the outcome that we want, and in so she now studies in Bard College in Berlin, and whenever she's back here for holidays, she's only given assignments about thinking. Because we said we don't want to know what has been taught in your course, but we want to know how you are thinking about this problem, how you're thinking. So every time we talk to her, so I keep going back to what Sultan said, that engineering is a mindset, it's not a qualification. Okay, so an engineer is a problem solver, and you don't need to learn engineering to become a problem solver. There are many problems which do not need any engineering knowledge or background to solve. And I think the best help we can give our children is to make them problem solvers. And if they can become problem solvers, I really don't think curriculum would matter, teacher quality would matter, anything would matter. I mean, these are things which will change at their own pace. But the key thing that parents need to do for their children is to make them problem solvers, and then they realize that, okay, this teacher is not teaching something that I like. Okay, how do I solve that problem? Right? For that student to go to the teacher and tell that teacher that I don't understand what you teach. He or she needs to have this problem-solving mindset. Okay, there should not be this question should not be stopped because the parents are telling the student or their own kid that you cannot question the teacher. Right?
Right.
So, once you have this problem-solving mindset, questions are welcome. They don't matter because questions are asked in the spirit of solving a problem. So when they are asked to somebody else also, they know that this question is asking me to solve a problem, not to put me down. So I think that that entire problem solution that we started this entire discussion with, I think that's the soul of education. And there's this famous quote by this physicist saying that I don't want. I would be concerned if people know their answers. I would be really happy if people have questions. Okay, so if people are given answers, that's what our education does.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And on that note, let's wind up a fantastic discussion that we've had. One of the best definitions of education that I've heard is the meaning of education is to transform an empty mind to an open mind. And somewhere down the line, we've forgotten and we believe that our purpose is to fill up that empty mind. And I think what Ninad in his words said that, encouraging children to think and solve problems and to make them think is one of the larger purposes. Focus on life skills, making teaching a lot more exciting for the children to engage with. These are some of the key points that stood out in today's discussion. This is a large problem. And I think the best way is to take the first step. And for everyone who's tuned in and watching in this particular session, thank you so much for joining us. And on behalf of the entire panel and the Tech Bharat team, I'd like to thank Mr. Jayasimas. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your experiences. Dr. Pratima, very insightful thoughts and ideas about life skills and the future of children. And Ninad, it was a pleasure listening to the way you think. And your one thing that's going to remain with all of us is teachers are problem solvers and not necessarily their role is to complete the curriculum and do some tests and exams. So with this, we come to an end. Framework for educators in the 21st century. Thank you all for joining us in this lovely session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Sultan.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sultan. That was a wonderful session. Thank you, Mr. Jaisimha. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Pratima,
you.
and thank you, Nimai.